Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for taking time to do this interview.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to do it.
Yeah, and it's great to be able to talk to you again. We talked not too long ago to be able to talk about Parasite Twin, and it's great to be able to talk again with some new Carach Angren.
Yeah, it's not too bad, right?
Oh, totally. And yeah, I remember at the end of the interview, you were talking about how you were also working on material for the next Carach Angren album, and I'm glad to see the way that it did turn out. I mean, this is such a great magnum opus for the band, I really feel. I love the concept. I love how everything comes together in this concept. Everything coming together with the music and lyrically, it's just like, it feels like a definitive Carach Angren album.
Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it. Yes.
Oh, not a problem. So, with that in mind, like, where did the idea come from to be able to come up with a concept album about the original Franckenstein?
Well, Dennis and I, Sergor and I, we were talking about, it's always with us, like, what's going to be the next subject? And sometimes one of us has an idea, sometimes both of us, sometimes none of us. And we had this idea with Franckenstein, in the back of our minds. And Sergor is a great fan of the movie because he saw it when he was just a kid. So it was one of those first horror movies he saw or was able to see while he was still too young. So he has a special connection. I didn't have that connection, but I really liked the idea. But I was a bit worried because I thought, hey, if we're going to do this, we need an original angle because the subject has been done so much already in popular culture, films and, and everything. And I didn't want the typical nuts and bolts monster image and all that kind of stuff. So I was like not completely sure from the beginning and I was wanting to have this original angle. Anyway, I was working already then on some music. This is like 2017 at the end. And then suddenly I had a dream, nightmare, where I was like floating in an old house and I heard dissonant piano tones, there was water flowing and I was sort of pulled into an open space. There were classical ornaments everywhere. And then I saw an old man on a painting and was drawn towards him. And he looked very angry. And then I woke up and it was kind of a strange dream. And I wrote down what I dreamt and I made a little drawing of the face I saw and I basically forgot about it. And then, some months later I was actually doing some research into Franckenstein and I decided to read the book, the original novel, and I was completely blown away. I had never read it before and I didn't think much of it, but then I was blown away. It has so much depth and it is an amazing work of art. And then I realized there was so much to the story that has never survived into this age, into movies or, references. And I was fascinated. And it was exactly then, 2018, that it was 200 years ago since Mary Shelley wrote her book. So there was like an exposition in museums here. So it was all coming together. I visited the museum, talked to some people, a scientist and an artist that had some exposition there. And then I started looking into Mary Shelley's life, what inspired her to write such a novel at such a young age. And then I came across a theory that she was inspired by a guy named Johann Conrad Dippel, who was an alchemist and theologian in Germany, and actually studied and worked at Castle Franckenstein. So I was like Googling him, researching him, and then his image of him showed up, and then it reminded me of the dream, the man I saw in the dream. So then I was like personally motivated suddenly. I always need something that pulls me into a story. And then I started working more on music and ideas, and then I had this idea to make an album about him, or at least connected to him. And what was fascinating me most is that we somehow I was getting hands on the story behind the story, and that was like kind of cool because no one really knows about it, or not many people. And that was something original that I wanted, not just, Victor makes a monster and that's it. But this was like the real story behind all this. The guy actually lived and had a notorious life. So that's how it started.
Yeah, and that's what I appreciate so much about this album is because you aren't just doing a word-for-word remake audibly about the story of Frankenstein, like you're actually going back and showing, just like you said, the backstory of how this was all made, and who Victor really was, and how this all came together. And it's just, I love a real take on that rather than doing the same old thing that you can see in movies and TV and other kinds of music. I love the take that you guys took on this.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what we wanted. And what, like I said, I needed that to feel motivated. Like this is something new and cool and fresh. It's inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, especially when I look at like the lyric videos that have come out for this and everything, it's just like all of the visuals just match so well with what the album is about. And, considering the times that we're in right now in 2020, I'm glad to see that this album did get some great representation online. I mean, sadly not being able to tour behind it, but I'm glad to see that it has been getting such acclaim, especially people like me loving this album so much, and just the reaction that you guys have been getting from this.
Yeah, it was overwhelming, and really, we were so grateful for that, because when we release singles, people are always a little bit like skeptical, because we are like storytellers, so people do the singles are just like little tastes, and I understand that. So it's we have been excited about this album for months, and we love it so much. And but then it came out 2 weeks ago, so you almost forget that people are just getting to know it, and then everyone loved it. And it was like overwhelming, and I was like, whoa, this is so cool.
Oh yeah, and I mean that's what always drove me to the band in the first place, is I love the concepts that's being created there. I mean, whether it's based on fairy tales, whether it's based on Frankenstein, whether it's based on original ideas, it's just, I love how you guys are able to tell a story within every album. And even though you have to pick out singles to be able to draw people in, make videos, etc., I do appreciate the fact that every single that does come out does feel like it's a good representation of what people should expect from the album, but doesn't give everything away.
Exactly. That's always the balance you have to seek. And so that's why we don't focus too much. We are relaxed, and we said like we do Monster, and that's going to raise some eyebrows because it's like people, and that's okay. And then we did the other songs, Vampire, and in the end it doesn't matter, because the whole album will be out anyway. And but I'm really glad with how it all went.
And with that in mind, I mean, obviously there's so much that you can take away from the backstory of this novel and the novel itself. I mean, when you didn't have that attachment to it until you started working on this album, like, what do you think of the story now?
You mean the original story?
Yes.
Yeah, I really love it, and that's what I was mentioning when I read the novel. I felt that there was, even just in the novel, there was already a lot to embark on and to explore further. One of the things that really struck me is that it's kind of philosophical as well, because if I remember correctly, Victor is like working on all these body parts and is pursuing science, and at the same time he's totally grossed out by himself and the fact that he cannot stop, and he's like ignoring his family. So this is inner dialogue, like, what am I doing? But at the same time he cannot sleep, he has to do it, and he's also taking shelter by almost meditating in nature, like long walks where he sort of tries to calm down. So this is like multi-dimensional to me. He's like using nature to get back to himself, but at the same time he's like manipulating nature. So there's so much to explore there. It's really a work of art. And I mean, the movies are great, but they are more sensational because it's more about action and convincing images. But the depth to this story, also the intelligence of the so-called monster, that he's becoming more and more aware. It's not just a monster with a couple of screws in the head, but it's like an entity, it's a being, and it raises questions, for whole humanity. So it's really amazing. But maybe it's also just me that finds that in there, because I love this kind of material. So that's all the thing,
Well, I actually agree with you 100% on that. I mean, I've always found that through Frankenstein, everything about like those philosophical ideas, and the idea of Victor's just like he just becomes so obsessed, and has to do what he has to do and ignores everything else in his life to create what eventually becomes an abomination to his eyes. And of course, to all the villagers and everything that the monster eventually does. And of course, in the movies, I mean, you see the sensationalism like you were talking about. And you get to the parts where Frankenstein has his son's son, a cousin of Victor, becomes the same idea. And it's just like, it gets so strange, and it's so separate from what the original idea was just to create those films. But when you go back to the original, and especially when you go back to the book, it's just like, it's so great to be able to go back and see what they've always left out of the novel, for the visual terms, and just being able to get that imagery in your own head rather than seeing the Hollywood versions of it.
Exactly, I love that, because my mind is usually, you draw your own pictures, and that's also easier in the creative process. And that's what I like with our albums, is hopefully that when you listen to it, you will see pictures in your mind. And that's what I try to have when I wrote most of the music, feeling. For example, a song like Soon for Solitude, that's what I wrote around the time that I read the novel, because I found the novel very sad. So there was a kind of sadness that went into that song, and hopefully, comes out when people listen to it. I like that kind of transitional idea.
Oh, very much so. And yeah, again, it just like everything feels captured through that. I mean, the lyric videos, the concept art, the album artwork, of course, lyrically, and the instrumentation that you're personally doing on this album. I really love everything that you're able to do behind the keys and synths, and I just feel like you've really outdone yourself on this album.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun too. It was like I tried to do 200% this time, and I had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun working on it. It also shows, like yesterday we uploaded some making of stuff, and you can see there we were just having fun making this album and experimenting. Like when we were talking about Parasite Twin, it was all in the same kind of time period. So some songs. Actually, one of the songs almost ended up on my solo album. Luckily, it ended up on the album. It was the title track. But it was like, that's how these things sometimes go, like you have something and I'm not sure like where does it fit best. And, but that's cool to be able to do this, and, that people love it so much. It's just great.
And, I was gonna mention that too, because the title track does feel like it could have fit on Parasite Twin. And I'm glad to see that, you were able to bring some kind of inspiration from, being able to write, for your solo work, and of course working on Carach Angren at the same time, just like being able to know how to separate the songs and not get too hurt about what song goes where.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, Carach is a kind of, it's priority in that sense. So there's always this feeling with me like, okay, if I make something and I feel that it could possibly go into the Carach world, then I have to try it, and I show it to Dennis, the guys. And I have always done that. And with the other songs on Parasite Twin, I felt more like, no, this is something I can release on my own, or whatever, or use somewhere. And it's not such a big deal, but. And then I had this song, and I sent it to Dennis, to Saragor, and I said, like, what do you think? It was just the music. It was exactly as it is now, but just not the vocals and everything. So what do you think? It's industrial. It could be something, I think, we could try. And his first response was, hell no. This is not industrial. This is not for Carach, And then he had some kind of feeling like, okay, I'm going to try something. And then he sang some vocals on it. He came up with this chorus idea, like, oh, in the name of God. And he sent it back to me, and I was like, I heard that, and I was like, that's it. This is it. I thought, that's it. So I called him, and I said, come over, and then we restructured some of it a little bit, and a little bit of the timing of the verses. And then it was done, and we were super happy with it, and he too, and me too, and it was like perfect. So it went from something like, no, hell no, to hell yes, and we love this song the best on the album almost. So that was a really cool story. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and for that reason, with it having that industrial feeling behind it, it does feel a little different in the sense of Carach Angren, but I do appreciate that fact. I love the fact on every album there is something a little different that happens musically on every album, and really seeing that growth of the band. And, the title track is a great example of that.
Yes, thanks. And that's what I always try to explain also to the fans. I understand it as a fan, I have some albums that I liked from bands I liked when I was 16. and you cling to that because it was an experience, and then they release something else and you get disappointed. But I always try to explain, like, as a band and as a person, you need to grow. I mean, when I was working on Lammendam, I was like 23 years old, and now I'm like turning 37, so I'm a completely different person. And on every album, you need to have that kind of flame, you know, like, we're doing something new. This is going to be the next thing. And on this album, this was, for example, the industrial element and this story with this obscure guy. And so it's really cool when people appreciate it. And there's always a delicate balance of not throwing everything away that's working, but stepping into some new territory. So I like that balance. It's a very delicate balance. It's like it's walking on a rope, you know. And so with a song like this was also one of the most fun songs for us, because it's so different from what we naturally do. You know, naturally we make very complicated song structures with 10,000 parts and which maybe to the outside people sounds like much more work. But the funny thing is that a song like this, in a sense, is much more challenging for us, because it's like, okay, we're stepping outside and what's happening? Is it going to work? You know? Yeah.
Oh, totally. And, you know, with that in mind, I mean, obviously with making sure that the album can be as cohesive as possible, I still love the fact that Frederick's Experiments came out as a bonus track. I mean, even though it's under 3 minutes and instrumental, I really love that little bonus track at the end.
Thank you. Yeah, it was never meant as a bonus track. It was just we had that many songs. And then we were like structuring the story, and then this one sort of was there as an extra. But it is just we felt that it's just a cool song like the others. But it was like story-wise, in the end, it fitted best as an extra. And the record label specifically from the beginning asked us, like, guys, can you do a bonus track? We really want that, you know, as to give something extra on the vinyl and all of that. And we understand it, so that's why we actually planned it from the beginning to have an extra track. So it was one of them had to go on the extra spot.
Oh, that's great. And yeah, I mean, with that being such a bonus track, I mean, you know, it's just like, I really love the feel of it when I look at it as a bonus track, separated from the story, but of course still part of the story. I mean, the fact that it does work so well together with the album in and of itself. I mean, the fact that you had that in mind, like if you did have some extra material, I mean, that would be such a great song to release as a bonus track. That's just so cool.
Yeah, it fits together, yeah.
Yeah, totally. And, of course, with this album, I mean, it's sadly the last album of the previous lineup that was going on there with Ivo playing drums. I mean, what's that like for you? I mean, knowing that he's stepping away from music.
Yeah, I mean, it has been double. When he came forward with that decision, it was like, holy shit, you know, it was in November. And, yeah, we were pretty bummed out by that, and both of us needed some time to process that. But we could also clearly see that he made up his mind, and he is the guy when he makes up his mind, he doesn't come back to it. We tried to convince him to just take a break. The sad thing is, like, there was no better time for a break than now, because everyone has a break in the sense of touring, you know. But yeah, he was done with it, and then pretty soon after that we realized, okay, we have to move on, and we decided to make the band, you know, keep it as a 2-person band with you know, additional live members. And we have a very good drummer now, Michiel van der Plicht, and who did a killer job on 70,000 Tons of Metal. And we have Bastian Bo, who we call the Butcher, who has been with us for 5 years live already. So, and that's really cool.
Oh yeah, and I'm really glad to see that is still going on, and you know, you still want to be able to keep the band going like this. I mean, between you and Dennis and having, you know, such creative ideas between both of you, being able to keep up the name of Carach going, and you know, finding 2 amazing musicians to be able to fill everything out when it comes to shows. I mean, when I've seen Michiel when he was playing at 70,000 Tons, and I saw like a video of it, I just thought he did an amazing job at those shows.
Yeah, it's insane. He did it in 2 weeks. And it was like, okay, I got it. And we rehearsed once and that was it. And it was like flawless. Yeah. Amazing drummer, amazing guy. So, super grateful for that. Yeah, imagine.
I never would have guessed that was only 2 weeks. That's incredible to me.
Yeah, because when Ivo left, we had an offer for 70,000 tons of metal on the table. That's what actually triggered his decision to come forward with his, what was bothering him. And then we sort of felt like, okay, but we want to do this show for the morality of the band, kind of, and then it's like, oh fuck, I have to find someone. So talking to people, our manager was looking for, so everyone was looking, and then in the end we ended up after a week or two with Michiel, and there was like only 3 or 4 weeks left for the show, if I remember correctly. And he said, yeah, okay, I'll do it. Okay, done. So, yeah, that's really cool.
Oh, yeah, that really is. And, even when sadness does come to a band, like in this situation, that you were able to overcome it and, find someone so quickly, and you were still able to play 70,000 tons and, everything to look forward to in the future, eventually when some kind of shows are able to come back after everything that's going on right now. I mean, with such a great album to be able to promote here, even with me talking to you, being able to promote that and everything in the future. I'm glad to see that Carach Angren is still going strong and will continue to go strong.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's how we felt with this album. That was a double thing, like he wanted to leave, and we felt super excited about this album. This was like, we can't wait to get this out, and but we were able to maintain that feeling, and people share that with us, so there's nothing better, It could have been the other way, but it would have been okay too, but this is better, of course, if people actually like it as well, so yeah.
Oh, definitely. With that in mind, I mean, obviously with this unexpected break that's going on here in 2020, have you felt any inspiration to write or do anything during these times?
Yeah, I've been working on some other projects, fortunately, now. That's really cool, but as for Carach, I mean, I'm glad that we have this out, so we need some time to, start something new, because we have literally been living with this for 3 years, and what was interesting to me is like when in January we were promoting the album to the press for the first time, and I was sort of like, okay, this is the moment where you are done with, the production and the music and also the story, and because initially I was trying to get some kind of modern connection on the album, like Dipple is still trying to, get some kind of revenge. And I never found a way to do it. And then COVID broke out, and it was like, oh, okay, maybe it fits too well to this album. So from my personal experience, it was kind of a very strange situation where you're working on an album, with medical experimentation and like with gruesome things, and Franckensteina, and then you're done, and then something, that's similar almost happens for real. That was kind of strange, It was like, what the hell is this now, But that's just a very personal thing,
Oh, yeah. And, it's funny because trying to make a modern part go towards the end of it, I mean, that brought me to last year. It was a Dracula on BBC. They had like it was on the original times, and then all of a sudden it jumped to 2019 and the story was still going.
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it was like a 3-part series on TV. Like it started from the original times of Dracula, and then moved all the way to 2019 at the time that it premiered. It was a very different concept, and I appreciate it when someone can, base something so much on the books, but still being able to have a little bit of their own spin at the end of it.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, and again with that, I mean, it's just like it always brings me back about what I love about what you do as a songwriter and what you do with Carach and what you do in your solo work, and when you are able to work on other projects as well too. I love the fact that you're able to put your own spin on things. I mean, whether you have to follow something note by note or you're free to be able to do what you want to. I mean, I can always tell it's your style because there's little things that I can notice about it, but just the fact that you are able to do so many different styles of music, and whether it be solo, whether it be Carach, whether it be with other people, and showing that off and just continuing to be able to do so. And during these tough times that are going on right now, the fact that you can still do that is a great thing to see.
Yeah, I see it. I'm grateful for it as well. Yes, thanks.